A millionaire CEO saw a little girl digging through trash with her baby brother until he learned why. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. It was a cold December evening, the kind where the air feels like it cuts straight through you. Caleb Whitmore, a millionaire CEO, stepped out of his luxury car, his leather shoes crunching against the icy sidewalk. The city of Chicago was alive with festive lights, families walking hand in hand, and the warm glow of holiday cheer spilling out from every window. But none of that mattered to Caleb. He walked alone, his hands buried deep in the pockets of his tailored coat, the weight of the world on his shoulders. His company was thriving, his wealth endless. Yet the emptiness inside him never seemed to lessen. He hadn't even planned to leave his office tonight. But something, a nagging emptiness, drove him to walk the streets. As he walked past the rows of shops and restaurants, the city's hustle and bustle felt like a distant hum, like a world he no longer belonged to. Then, through the corner of his eye, he spotted something. Two small figures huddled near a trash can, their tiny hands sorting through discarded items. A little girl, no older than 6 or 7, digging through the cold, wet mess. Her clothes were ragged, her face pale with dirt and exhaustion. She was so focused on her task that she didn't notice Caleb approaching. But it wasn't just her. In her arms, she cradled a small bundle, her baby brother, wrapped in a tattered blanket. Caleb stopped in his tracks, something stirring in him that he couldn't quite explain. He had seen homeless people before, but this was different. This little girl wasn't just digging through the trash for food, she was trying to care for her brother, her only family. Her face, though dirty and tear-streaked, held a certain determination. It was a look Caleb had seen before, but only in the mirror. He shook off the feeling, approaching them slowly. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. The girl froze for a moment, her eyes wide with fear, but she didn't pull away. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Don't take us back. We're okay here." Caleb's heart tightened. Her words were like a punch to the chest. He could see the fear in her eyes, a fear that spoke of a life far harder than anything he had ever known. Without thinking, he kneeled down, his gaze shifting from the girl to the baby boy in her arms. The child was so still, his face flushed with fever, his tiny hands weakly clutching the blanket. Caleb's instincts kicked in. He knew he couldn't just walk away. His mind raced, but his actions were already decided. He gently lifted the baby boy from the girl's arms, holding him close. "You're safe now," Caleb whispered. "I'm not going to let anyone hurt you." He looked at the little girl, her eyes full of confusion and hope, and made a promise he had never intended to make. "I'll take care of you both." The night around them seemed to freeze, the city's noise fading into the background. For the first time in a long time, Caleb felt something stir within him, a sense of purpose he hadn't known he was missing. As he carried the two children to his car, he couldn't shake the thought that this moment had somehow changed everything. A few moments later, Caleb Whitmore found himself sitting in the back of his sleek black car, holding the fragile baby boy in his arms, while the little girl sat quietly beside him. The car's interior was warm, the heat blasting, but it did little to ease the cold that seemed to have settled deep in his bones. The night air was still and silent, broken only by the steady hum of the engine. He glanced over at the girl. Her small face was drawn with exhaustion, her wide eyes staring out the window, distant and lost in a world Caleb could not even begin to understand. He looked at her for a long moment, wondering about the life she had led, the things she had seen. The baby boy, still too weak to cry, lay against his chest, his small body trembling ever so slightly, as if trying to hold on to some shred of warmth and hope. Caleb couldn't ignore the overwhelming guilt that crept into his chest. This was his world, a world of wealth, power, and control. But it felt so foreign now, so irrelevant. His mind kept drifting back to the girl and her brother. How had they ended up here? Discarded, like pieces of trash in the cold night. Caleb had everything he could ever need: money, status, a place in the world. And yet, as he looked down at the little boy, he felt more helpless than ever before. The thoughts swirled in his head, but he pushed them aside as the car pulled up in front of his luxurious penthouse. The building gleamed in the night, its towering presence dominating the skyline. Caleb stepped out of the car, his breath catching in his throat as he realized that, for the first time in a long while, his thoughts were no longer consumed by business or the empty promises of success. His only thought was of the two small lives he had promised to protect. The doorman gave him a curious look as Caleb walked past, holding the child close to his chest. The elevator ride was quick, the silence between them thick with unspoken questions. Caleb's mind raced as he made his way to his apartment. He had no idea what to do next, but he knew one thing for certain. This was not the world he had planned for himself. He wasn't sure how to take care of these children. He wasn't a father. He didn't even know how to begin. But as he laid the baby in the spare room, he glanced back at the little girl. She had taken a seat on the couch, still so quiet, her eyes haunted. She was no longer digging through trash. Now she was here, in a place so foreign to her, in a home so alien to what she had ever known. Caleb felt a twinge of guilt. He could offer her warmth and safety, but could he give her the one thing she needed most: stability? He stood there for a moment, staring at her, his heart heavy. "What's your name?" he asked softly, breaking the silence. She looked up at him, her eyes not quite meeting his. "Emily," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Caleb nodded, feeling something stir inside him. He didn't know why, but something about her name felt important. Something about her story felt like it was meant to be shared with him. He sat down slowly beside her on the couch. "Emily," he said again, almost as if testing the name on his lips. "I'm Caleb." She nodded again, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Are you okay?" he asked. But as soon as the words left his mouth, he realized how meaningless they sounded. What could he say to a little girl who had been through so much, to a child who had never known anything but survival? "I'm okay," she said quietly, though Caleb knew she was far from it. He could see it in the way she shivered, the way her small frame seemed to shrink into itself. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. Caleb wasn't sure if she was thanking him for bringing them into his home, for saving them from the cold, or if she was simply thanking him for the one thing she had never been given: care. "I don't know what to do," Caleb said, his voice soft. "But I promise you, Emily, I will help you." The words felt strange on his tongue, foreign and untested, but something inside him knew they were true. He didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, he made a silent vow to protect her, to give her a chance at a life she deserved. And for the first time in years, Caleb felt something stir inside him, something that hadn't been there in a long time, a sense of responsibility, a sense of purpose. Caleb woke up to the soft sound of footsteps the next morning. For a brief moment, he thought it was a dream, the faint echo of small feet on marble floors. But when he opened his eyes, the memory of last night came flooding back. the children, Emily, and her baby brother. He sat up, his head spinning as he realized that everything that had happened was real. The morning light spilled through the large glass windows, painting the room in shades of gold and white. Caleb found Emily sitting quietly on the couch, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes fixed on the city skyline. The baby slept peacefully in a blanket beside her. She looked out of place in his polished, modern apartment, like a fragile piece of humanity that had wandered into a world built for machines. Her small fingers were tracing invisible lines on the glass, following the paths of birds that flew past the window. Caleb walked over slowly, careful not to startle her. "Did you sleep at all?" he asked softly. Emily shook her head. "The lights are too bright," she whispered. "We're not used to lights at night." The words cut through him like a knife. He thought of how easily he had taken light for granted: warm lamps, heated rooms, a refrigerator full of food, while this child had spent her nights shivering in darkness, trying to protect her brother from the cold. "Would you like some breakfast?" he asked. She hesitated, glancing down at her brother before nodding. "If it's not too much trouble," she murmured. "It's no trouble at all," Caleb said gently, forcing a small smile. He walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator, suddenly realizing how empty it was. He rarely cooked at home. His life had been nothing but business dinners, catered meals, and long nights at the office. He found a loaf of bread, some eggs, and milk. It was not much, but it was enough. As he cooked, the smell of toasted bread and scrambled eggs filled the apartment. Emily's stomach growled softly, and when Caleb brought her a plate, she hesitated again, as though waiting for permission to eat. "Go ahead," he said, setting the plate in front of her. "It's yours." She took a careful bite, chewing slowly, savoring every piece as if it were the first real meal she had had in days. "Thank you," she said quietly, her eyes meeting his for the first time. There was something hauntingly old in those eyes, like she had seen too much for someone so young. Caleb sat across from her, watching her eat. Every gesture she made, every word she said, carried a kind of quiet resilience that both broke his heart and amazed him. "How long have you been out there?" he asked after a while. Emily looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "Since the summer," she said. After Mom got sick." She paused, her small hands tightening around the edge of her plate. "She said she'd be right back. She told me to take care of my brother, but she never came back." Caleb swallowed hard. The lump in his throat was heavy, painful. "And your dad?" he asked carefully. She shook her head. "I never met him." The air between them grew still. Caleb leaned back in his chair, feeling a wave of helplessness wash over him. He wanted to say something comforting, something that could make up for all the hurt this child had endured, but no words felt right. Instead, he simply said, "You're safe now, both of you." Emily looked at him for a long moment, as if testing the truth of his words. Then she nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Caleb spent the rest of the day making phone calls, arranging a doctor to check on the baby, whose name, he learned, was Noah. When the doctor arrived, he confirmed what Caleb already suspected. The baby was malnourished and weak, but with proper care, he would recover. That night, as the city lights flickered outside, Caleb sat alone in his study. He stared at the photo on his desk, his late wife, Claire, and felt a strange ache in his chest. She had always been the one with compassion, the one who saw people for who they were, not what they could offer. He could almost hear her voice saying, "Do not just give them money, Caleb. Give them a chance." As he sat there in silence, he realized that maybe, for the first time, he understood what she had meant. He looked out toward the living room, where Emily was tucking her brother into bed on the couch. The sight did something to him. It cracked open. A part of him he thought was gone. Forever. For the first time in years, Caleb Whitmore felt something more than success, more than obligation. He felt the stirring of something real, compassion, and deep down, a promise formed in his heart, one he didn't yet understand, but one he knew he would keep. He would not let these children disappear back into the darkness again. A few days passed since Caleb brought Emily and her baby brother Noah into his home. The apartment, once cold and sterile, now felt different, warmer, more alive. Every day, Caleb would return home to find Emily sitting by the window, watching the city below, her face both full of curiosity and guarded, like she was still unsure if this was real or just another fleeting moment of kindness. Noah, though still fragile, was slowly recovering. His tiny body gained strength with every passing day. Caleb had arranged for a pediatrician to visit regularly, and Noah's health was improving. But it was clear he had suffered from more than just hunger. He had suffered from neglect. One evening, after dinner, Caleb sat at the kitchen table with Emily. The plates were still there, but the space between them felt less tense than it had at first. Caleb had been trying to get Emily to talk more, to open up about her past. But it hadn't been easy. She kept her emotions close to her chest, and each time he asked her about her life, before she came to him, she would shrink back, her gaze growing distant. "You've been through so much," Caleb said quietly, his voice full of sympathy. "But you're not alone anymore. You and Noah can stay here as long as you need." Emily's eyes flickered up to meet his. There was a softness in her gaze, but it quickly vanished, replaced with uncertainty. "I don't know what to do," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm not used to people caring." Caleb's heart tightened at her words. He realized then how much emotional armor this little girl had built around herself. "You don't have to know what to do yet," Caleb said. "I'm here for you. And so is Noah. We'll figure it out together." The words felt foreign to him. He wasn't sure how to help them, but he was sure of one thing. He couldn't let them go back to the streets. He couldn't let them slip away, like so many others did. The next day, Caleb had a meeting scheduled with his lawyer. There were some things that needed to be sorted out. Official guardianship, legal papers, everything that would ensure Emily and Noah stayed under his care. As much as he had the means to care for them, he knew the legal system would be more complicated than he anticipated. But he was determined. For the first time in a long while, he had a purpose. As he walked into his office, his assistant greeted him with a list of tasks. But his mind wasn't on the work. It wasn't on the mergers, the financial reports, or the usual hustle that came with running a multi-million-dollar business. His mind was on the children. He couldn't shake the thought of them, couldn't shake the picture of Emily's wide, haunted eyes and Noah's fragile little body. That night, after the legal meetings and endless calls, Caleb returned home to find Emily and Noah sitting together in the living room. Emily was carefully brushing Noah's hair, her movements slow and tender, as though she were learning to care for him in a way she had never been able to before. Caleb paused in the doorway, watching the scene unfold before him. In that moment, he realized just how much he had underestimated the strength of these children. Emily, despite everything, was trying to be the protector. She was doing what she could to heal, even if it meant taking small steps every day. Caleb stepped forward quietly, not wanting to disturb their peace. "You two look cozy," he said softly, trying to lighten the mood. Emily glanced up and gave him a small smile. "He's been asking for his mom," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Caleb's chest tightened at the mention of their mother. He knew how much Emily missed her, how much she wished for things to be different. I know, Caleb said, his voice low. And it's okay to miss her. It's okay to feel sad. But you're not alone now. You have each other. And I'm here too. Emily nodded, her eyes filling with unshed tears. She looked down at Noah, who was now asleep in her lap, a soft sigh escaping his lips. Caleb could see the love in her eyes, the quiet strength that was slowly building. Thank you, Emily said, her voice small but genuine. Caleb smiled softly. You don't have to thank me. You're family now. The words hung in the air, a promise. Caleb had known he could offer them a safe place, food, and shelter. But what he hadn't expected was the gift they were giving him, in return the chance to learn what it truly meant to care for someone, to be a father in a way he never thought possible. That night, as he lay in bed, Caleb couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. He wasn't the same man who had stepped into his penthouse days ago. The walls he had carefully built around his heart were slowly crumbling. In their place was something new, something messy, uncertain, but real. And for the first time in a long while, Caleb found himself looking forward to tomorrow. Days turned into weeks, and Caleb Whitmore's once silent home began to breathe again. The echo of footsteps no longer belonged only to him. Laughter, soft and cautious at first, now floated through the halls. Emily had started to relax, little by little. She would spend her mornings drawing by the window and her afternoons helping Caleb in the kitchen, even though she barely reached the counter. Noah was growing stronger too, his cheeks rounder, his eyes brighter, his laughter infectious. Caleb had hired a nanny to assist during the day, but he made it clear that Emily and Noah were not a charity project. They were family now. He found himself leaving work earlier, spending more evenings at home, learning the rhythms of caring for two small souls who had known nothing but uncertainty. Yet, despite the warmth returning to the apartment, there was a lingering unease in the air, a sense that peace could not last forever. One evening after dinner, Caleb sat in his study reviewing paperwork when he heard a faint sound. It was Emily, softly singing to Noah in the next room. Her voice was thin but pure, carrying the kind of ache only a child who has seen too much could have. He set his papers aside and leaned against the doorframe, watching her as she brushed Noah's hair, her small hands moving with gentle care. Something about the moment struck him an image that felt too familiar. Emily's posture, the way she hummed, even the song she was singing, it all tugged at a memory buried deep inside him. That song, Caleb said quietly, stepping closer. Where did you learn it? Emily looked up, startled. My mom used to sing it, she said. When it was too cold at night and we didn't have a blanket, she'd hum it so we wouldn't feel scared. Her voice trembled. She said it was from a long time ago, from someone she once knew. Caleb's breath caught in his throat. The melody was one he hadn't heard in over a decade. His late wife, Claire, used to sing that same tune when their daughter was born, before tragedy took them both away. He felt a chill run down his spine. Do you remember your mom's name? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily hesitated, her fingers clutching the edge of Noah's blanket. Her name was Sarah, she said softly. Sarah Bennett. Caleb froze. The name hit him like a bolt of lightning. Sarah Bennett. It could not be. Years ago, before he became the CEO everyone admired, before success had hardened him, he had been engaged to a woman named Sarah Bennett. She had been kind, full of life, a woman with dreams bigger than either of them could hold. They had parted ways painfully after an argument about the direction of their lives. He had chosen ambition. She had chosen compassion. And now, her name was being spoken by this little girl, the one he had pulled from the cold, the one he had promised to protect. "Your mother," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Did she ever tell you about your father?" Emily shook her head. "She said he was gone. She never said why." Caleb felt his knees weaken. He sat down slowly, trying to make sense of the rush of emotion crashing over him. Could it be possible? Could Emily be the child he never knew he had? The timelines fit. The name, the song, the eyes that had haunted him from the moment he saw her, they all matched. His mind reeled, his heart pounding. He wanted to believe it, but the thought terrified him. He looked at Emily, her face pale but curious, unaware of the storm raging inside him. "Emily," he said gently, "I think I may have known your mother." She blinked in surprise. "You did? A long time ago," he whispered. "Before you were born." He hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "She was someone I cared about very much." Emily looked down, her small hands gripping Noah's. "She said she used to know someone kind, someone who wanted to change the world. But she said the world changed him first." Caleb's heart broke. He wanted to speak, to confess, to tell her everything, but he could not. Not yet. The truth was too heavy, too uncertain. "She was right," he murmured, almost to himself. The world did change him. That night, Caleb sat awake long after Emily and Noah had fallen asleep. The revelation gnawed at him, his mind replaying every memory he had of Sarah, the laughter, the letters, the words he never said. If Emily truly was his daughter, fate had brought her back into his life in a way he could never have imagined. As the city slept beyond his windows, Caleb made a silent promise to himself and to Sarah's memory. He would not fail this child. Not again. Whatever it took, he would uncover the truth. And if it was real, if Emily truly was his, he would spend the rest of his life making up for the years he had lost. Caleb spent the following days in a haze of uncertainty. The revelation that Emily might be his daughter weighed heavily on his mind. He had never believed in fate or destiny. But now, standing at the crossroads of his life, he felt like a puppet at the mercy of forces he didn't understand. His feelings for Emily had deepened since that night, when she had sung her mother's song. His bond with her had been growing slowly, like a tiny flame that threatened to consume everything around it. She had become more than just the child he had promised to protect. She had become a mirror to his own lost past, a reflection of the love he had once shared with Sarah. Yet Caleb knew that the truth was still out of his reach. Emily, despite all her quiet strength, hadn't yet opened up to him completely. He could see the hesitation in her eyes, the way she would look away whenever he asked about her life before she came to him. It was as if she was afraid that any answer would shatter the fragile sense of safety she had found with him. Caleb couldn't blame her. He had no idea how to approach her with the truth. How could he possibly tell her that he might be her father? How could he explain that the woman she had lost, the woman she held on to so desperately, was someone he had once loved deeply? The weight of the past felt suffocating, and he was unsure of how to break through the wall that Emily had built around herself. One evening, Caleb decided to take a different approach. Instead of confronting her with questions, he simply spent time with her. He found her sitting by the window once again, staring out at the city below. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple. Caleb sat down next to her, offering no words at first. They just sat there, watching the world outside, two strangers bound by something neither fully understood. "You know," Caleb said softly after a while, "when I was your age, I used to sit by a window just like this." Emily turned to him, her eyes curious but guarded. "I used to dream about all the things I would do when I grew up," he continued, his voice quiet, almost nostalgic. "I thought I could change the world. But sometimes, Life doesn't turn out the way we expect, does it? Emily's lips parted, as if she was going to say something, but she paused. Her gaze shifted to the baby, who was peacefully sleeping in the next room. After a moment of silence, she spoke. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could take care of Noah. I thought we could make it on our own. But now, it's different." Caleb's heart broke at her words. He could hear the uncertainty in her voice, the fear of not knowing what would come next. "It's okay to not have all the answers," Caleb replied softly. "I don't have all the answers either. But you don't have to do it alone. You've got me, and you've got Noah. We'll figure it out together." Emily's eyes softened, and for the first time, she gave him a small, tentative smile. It was fleeting, but it was real. Caleb felt a glimmer of hope. He had made a promise to himself to be the father Emily needed, to be the protector that Noah deserved. But more than that, he realized that he had made a promise to Sarah, a promise that he would never truly be able to keep, but one he would try to honor every single day. As the days passed, Caleb continued to focus on Emily and Noah, making sure they had everything they needed: comfort, security, and most importantly, love. He continued to learn about them, to understand their needs, their fears, their hopes. Emily, slowly but surely, began to open up to him more. She started to share stories of her mother, stories that brought back memories of Sarah for Caleb. He would listen intently, not saying much, but letting her speak as she needed to. But Caleb knew the truth could not be hidden forever. As much as he wanted to protect Emily from the weight of the past, he could not shield her from the truth. He could not continue living in the shadows of uncertainty. He had to face the past, confront the mistakes he had made, and finally find out whether Emily truly was his daughter. And so, he made a decision. He would seek out the answers, no matter the cost. He would dig into the past and uncover the truth, for Emily's sake and for his own. As he lay in bed that night, Caleb felt a sense of determination settle within him. Tomorrow, he would begin the search for the truth, and whatever he found, he would face it head on. He had already made a promise to Emily, a promise to protect her. Now, he would make a promise to himself to no longer be a man bound by regret, but a man willing to do whatever it took to build the future they all deserved. The following week, Caleb took the first step towards unraveling the truth that had been hanging over him like a shadow. He knew he couldn't live in this uncertainty forever. He had to find out if Emily was truly his daughter. The idea had been lingering in the back of his mind for days, gnawing at him. But now, it was time to take action. With a deep breath, Caleb made a call to his lawyer, hoping to find some trace of the past that could give him the answers he desperately needed. The conversation was short and to the point. "I need you to look into a woman named Sarah Bennett," Caleb said, trying to keep his voice steady. "She had a daughter, Emily. I need to know if there's any record, any connection, anything." Caleb could hear the hesitation on the other end of the line. "Caleb," the lawyer said slowly, "are you sure about this? Digging into the past might open up more than you're ready for." Caleb's grip tightened on the phone. He didn't want to hear caution, but he knew the lawyer was right. The past had a way of breaking into the present when least expected. "Just do it," Caleb said firmly, his voice more resolute than he felt. "I need to know." Later that day, Caleb received a call. The lawyer had found something. A file. A birth certificate. It was brief, but it was enough to make his heart race. He had wanted confirmation, but seeing it in black and white was something else entirely. Sarah Bennett's name was there, along with a date, and Emily's, his daughter's name, neatly typed beneath it. Caleb leaned back in his chair, the weight of the information sinking in. Emily, the little girl who had come into his life so unexpectedly, was his. He had a daughter. His thoughts began to swirl. He wanted to rush to her, to tell her the truth, but the words stuck in his throat. He wasn't sure how to break the news to Emily, how to tell her that the man she had come to trust was the very person who had once been part of her mother's life. The truth was complicated. What would it mean for Emily? Would it change the way she looked at him, or would she feel betrayed for not knowing sooner? He couldn't bear the thought of losing the fragile bond they had started to build. Caleb spent the next few days pacing through his thoughts, trying to find the right moment, the right words. But as the days passed, it became increasingly clear to him that there would never be a perfect time. There was never going to be a perfect way to tell her, no matter how hard he tried. One evening, after dinner, Caleb found Emily sitting by the window again, watching the city lights flicker below. She seemed lost in thought, her face serious, her eyes distant. It was then that Caleb knew he couldn't wait any longer. "Emily," he called softly, taking a seat beside her. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "I need to tell you something important," Caleb said, his voice shaking slightly. Emily frowned, sensing the shift in the air. She remained quiet, waiting for him to continue. "I've been looking into your past," Caleb began slowly. "I know you've told me about your mom, about how she used to sing to you when you were little." He paused, swallowing hard. "I didn't want to say anything before, but now I need you to know that I knew your mom, and I think I'm your father." Emily blinked, her eyes wide with surprise. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at him, as if trying to process his words. Caleb could see her mind racing. You're my father?" Emily whispered, her voice small, unsure. Caleb nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "I think so," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know about you until recently, but I'm your father. Emily, I don't know if this is something you can understand, or if it changes anything for you, but I need you to know the truth." The room fell silent. Emily's expression was unreadable. She seemed frozen, her gaze fixed on him, but her eyes held a storm of emotions: confusion, disbelief, maybe even fear. Caleb reached out hesitantly, wanting to comfort her, but unsure of what she needed. "I don't want you to feel like you have to change anything," Caleb said softly. "I know this is a lot to take in, but I just want you to know that I'm here for you. I've always been here for you, even if I didn't know you were mine." Emily didn't speak for a long time. Her eyes searched his face, as if looking for some kind of sign, some kind of confirmation. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know what this means." Caleb nodded slowly. "I don't either, Emily, but I'm willing to figure it out with you. Together." Emily remained quiet for a while, her small hands folded in her lap. Caleb waited, giving her the space she needed. After a long silence, she spoke again, her voice barely audible. I think I'm glad you're here," she said, almost shyly. Caleb felt his heart swell with relief. He had been terrified that the truth would tear them apart. But in this small, fragile moment, he realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. A real family. A family he had never expected but was now determined to protect, no matter the cost. The days after Caleb's revelation were filled with a quiet, uncertain tension. Emily was still processing what he had told her. She hadn't pulled away from him, but neither had she completely embraced the truth. Caleb couldn't blame her. He understood better than anyone the weight of what he had just laid on her shoulders. Emily had already lost so much. Her mother, her home, her sense of stability, and now her world was being turned upside down once again, with the realization that the man she had come to trust, the man who had promised to protect her, was also someone from her past. A father she had never known. Caleb tried not to push her. He gave her the space she needed, the time to come to terms with it. He spent more time with Noah, ensuring the little boy was comfortable and well cared for. Noah was still weak, but his bright eyes and the sound of his laughter brought a sense of normalcy to their home. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep Caleb grounded. One afternoon, a week after the truth had been revealed, Emily came to Caleb. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat beside him, her small hands fidgeting in her lap. Caleb looked at her, his heart pounding, waiting for her to speak. Finally, she turned to him, her eyes full of confusion but also something softer, something Caleb hadn't seen before. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Caleb nodded, his voice gentle. "Of course, anything." "Why didn't you come sooner?" she asked, her voice small, almost fragile. The question hit Caleb harder than he expected. It was the question he had been dreading, the one that he knew would come eventually, but he had never been able to prepare for. He had no easy answer. "I didn't know, Emily," he said softly. "I didn't know you existed. And even if I did, I wasn't the kind of person you needed back then." Emily looked down at her hands. "But you could have helped," she whispered. "You could have helped Mom. You could have helped me." Caleb's heart twisted with guilt. She was right. He could have been there. He should have been. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't change the past, but I can be here now. I know I've made mistakes, but I want to make things right. I want to be the father you need." Emily didn't say anything for a long moment. She just sat there, her eyes lost in thought. Caleb waited, not knowing what else to say. He didn't want to pressure her. He just needed her to know that he was here now. Finally, Emily spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "I don't know how to trust you," she said. "I don't know how to believe that you really want to be here." Caleb nodded, his throat tight. "I understand," he said. "Trust takes time. I won't rush you, Emily. I'll be here, no matter what." For the next few days, Emily seemed to retreat into herself again, spending more time in her room or sitting by the window. Caleb tried not to push her, but he couldn't help but wonder if he had lost her. The weight of his own failure hung heavy in his chest, but he refused to give up. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to let fear or guilt drive a wedge between them. Then, one evening, as Caleb was cleaning up after dinner, he heard a soft knock on the door of his office. He looked up to see Emily standing there, her face uncertain but determined. "Can we talk?" she asked. Caleb's heart skipped a beat. "Of course," he said, standing up. Emily stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She hesitated for a moment, her hands wringing together. Then, looking up at him, she said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about you being my father." Caleb's chest tightened, but he said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "I'm still not sure I understand," she said quietly. "But I think I want to try." Caleb felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he kept his expression calm. "You don't have to try if you're not ready," he said gently. "But if you want to, I'm here. I'll be here every step of the way." Emily nodded, her eyes bright but full of uncertainty. "I don't know what it means, but I guess it's worth finding out." Caleb smiled softly, his heart full. "That's all I'm asking," he said. "We'll figure it out together." In the days that followed, Caleb and Emily began to slowly rebuild their relationship. It wasn't easy. There were awkward moments, silences that felt too heavy, and times when Emily would pull away. But there were also moments of connection, small gestures, like when Caleb made her favorite meal, or when she asked him to read to her before bed. They were learning to trust each other, to understand each other. Emily was still unsure of everything, but Caleb knew that the most important thing was that she was willing to try. For the first time in a long time, Caleb felt hope. Hope that he could be the father Emily needed. Hope that they could build a family together, even if it meant starting over. And with each passing day, he was more determined to make it happen, to give Emily the life she deserved, the one he had failed to give her before. Weeks went by, and things in the Whitmore household began to settle into a new normal. Caleb had made it clear to Emily that there was no rush, no expectation for her to accept everything all at once. He gave her the time and space she needed, while at the same time, he kept proving through his actions that he was there for her and Noah. Slowly, the walls Emily had built began to soften, and for the first time since she had arrived, she allowed herself to ask for things. Little things, like asking Caleb to make pancakes on a Sunday morning, or to sit with her when she was feeling nervous about something at school. The bond between them was growing, though it was still fragile. Caleb couldn't help but notice how different things were now. He had always been the one who gave orders, the one who made decisions. His life had been about controlling outcomes, managing companies, and making calculated moves. But with Emily, with Noah, it was different. There were no perfect answers, no strategies, no ways to make everything turn out just right. There was only patience, trust, and a willingness to let go of the past. One day, as Caleb was heading out for a meeting, he saw Emily sitting on the couch, flipping through an old photo album. The pages were filled with pictures of a time long past of Sarah, his late wife, and of a younger Caleb, someone who seemed like a different person altogether. Emily was staring at a picture of Sarah holding a baby, her face glowing with joy. Caleb knew that it must have been a picture of her mother, holding Emily when she was a baby, and the sight of it stirred something deep inside him. He could almost feel Sarah's presence in the room, as if she were there with them, watching over Emily. "I found this one," Emily said quietly, not looking up at him. Is that my mom?" Caleb nodded, his voice soft. "Yes, it is." Emily continued to flip through the album, her fingers gently grazing each photo. "She looks so happy," she said, her voice almost wistful. Caleb sat down next to her, unsure of what to say. He wanted to tell her everything, to explain why things had turned out the way they had, but the words wouldn't come. All he could do was offer a small smile and say, "She was. Your mom was an incredible person." Emily didn't say anything else. She just kept looking through the album, as if she were searching for pieces of a past that she could never fully understand. Caleb knew that she needed to process it in her own time. He couldn't rush her into accepting the truth, or make her feel like she had to take on the weight of the past. All he could do was be there, be present, and support her. Later that evening, after dinner, Caleb decided to take a walk to clear his mind. The weather had started to warm up, and the air was crisp and fresh. He found himself walking along the edge of the city park, the quiet stillness of the evening offering him a rare moment of peace. As he walked, his mind wandered back to the day he first met Emily, to the moment he had pulled her and Noah from the cold, and to the promise he had made to protect them. He thought about how much his life had changed since then. In many ways, he was still the same man, but in other ways, he had become someone entirely different. He was no longer just a businessman chasing success. He was now a father, learning how to navigate the complexities of love, loss, and healing. Caleb paused for a moment, looking up at the sky. The stars were beginning to appear, twinkling in the clear night sky. He took a deep breath, feeling a sense of gratitude fill him. He had spent so much of his life focused on building an empire, on achieving goals, on proving his worth to the world. But now, for the first time, he realized that the true measure of success was not in wealth or power. It was in the relationships he had built, in the lives he had touched, and in the love he had been given. The next morning, when Caleb returned home, he found Emily in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for Noah. She was standing on a step stool, trying to reach the counter, and the sight of her made Caleb smile. She was so much like her mother, with her quiet strength and determination. Emily looked up when she saw him and offered a shy smile. "I made pancakes," she said, holding up a plate with a stack of them. Caleb walked over, his heart swelling with pride. "They look amazing," he said. "Thank you." Emily handed him a plate, and as Caleb sat down at the table, he realized how far they had come. There was still so much to figure out, so much to learn about each other, but in this small moment, it felt like they were on the right path. Caleb knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, difficult conversations, and moments of doubt. But he also knew that he wasn't alone anymore. He had Emily. He had Noah. And for the first time in a long time, Caleb felt like he had a family again. A real family. A family he would protect with everything he had. As the weeks went by, Caleb's life began to shift in ways he hadn't anticipated. What had started as a promise to protect Emily and Noah had slowly transformed into something deeper. Caleb was no longer just their protector. He had become their anchor, their steady presence in a world that had often been anything but steady. Emily, once so withdrawn and distant, had started to open up to him in small ways. She would ask him about his day, and when he got home from work, she would often be waiting for him, her small hands clutching a book or a drawing she had done. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was progress. One evening, as Caleb sat down to dinner, Emily placed a drawing in front of him. It was a picture of the three of them: Emily, Noah, and Caleb, the family they had become. There were no words, but the message was clear. It was her way of telling him that, in her eyes, they were a family. Caleb's heart swelled with emotion, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace. This was the family he had always wanted, even if it hadn't happened the way he had imagined. "It's beautiful," Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion. Emily smiled, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I made it for you," she said, her voice soft but sincere. Caleb could feel his heart breaking with gratitude. He had always prided himself on his success, on his ability to control every aspect of his life. But this was something he couldn't control. Something that had been given to him without expectation, and it was more valuable than anything he had ever earned. Later that night, as Caleb sat on the couch with Emily and Noah, he thought back to the days before they came into his life. Before they found their way to him, he had been a man consumed by work, by the need to prove his worth to the world. Now, he was a father, learning to prove his worth to the two people who mattered most. And for the first time in his life, he felt truly fulfilled. The next day, Caleb had a meeting with his lawyer. The papers were finally ready, papers that would make him Emily's legal guardian. He had thought about this moment for weeks, about the legal steps he would need to take to ensure that Emily and Noah were protected, that they were safe, and that they would never be taken from him. But when the lawyer handed him the papers, Caleb realized something. These papers didn't make him a father. They didn't give him the love he felt for Emily and Noah. They didn't grant him the right to care for them. That was something he had earned every single day by simply being there for them, by showing up when it mattered, by proving that he was someone they could rely on. As he signed the papers, Caleb felt a sense of finality. He wasn't just protecting Emily and Noah anymore. He was building a future with them. After the meeting, Caleb returned home to find Emily sitting at the kitchen table, her homework scattered in front of her. When she saw him, she looked up, her eyes bright. "How did the meeting go?" she asked. Caleb smiled, a real, genuine smile. "It went well," he said, sitting down next to her. "We're official now. You're officially my daughter." Emily looked at him, her eyes soft. "I know," she said quietly. "I've always known." Caleb's heart skipped a beat. For all the uncertainty, for all the fear he had felt in those early days, Emily had known all along. She had known that, despite the mistakes of the past, they were family. And in that moment, Caleb realized that family wasn't just a title or a legal arrangement. It was love. It was the quiet moments, like when Emily showed him her drawings, or when Noah's laughter filled the house. It was the promise he had made to himself and to Sarah all those years ago to never let another child suffer alone. And now, with Emily and Noah by his side, Caleb knew that promise would be kept. That night, as they sat down for dinner together, Emily passed him another drawing. This time, a simple heart, with the words, "Family Forever," written inside. Caleb's eyes welled with tears, but he didn't say anything. He just hugged her, feeling the weight of everything he had gained. The family he had never expected, the family he had almost lost, was finally his. And for the first time in his life, Caleb felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The weeks continued to slip by, and with each passing day, Caleb felt a growing sense of peace settle in his home. Emily and Noah had become more than just the children he had promised to protect. They had become the family he had always dreamed of. The family he never knew he was capable of having. There were still moments of hesitation, moments when Emily would retreat into herself. But Caleb had learned not to rush her. He knew that the scars from her past would take time to heal. But he was there, every step of the way, offering patience, love, and understanding. One afternoon, as Caleb sat in his study working on some papers, Emily entered the room holding Noah, who had been quiet for most of the morning. He could see the concern in her eyes as she carefully placed Noah in Caleb's arms. "He hasn't been eating much," Emily said softly. "I think something might be wrong." Caleb's heart skipped a beat as he looked down at Noah. The boy was pale, his small body still, his eyes lacking the usual sparkle. "It's okay," Caleb said, trying to reassure Emily, though his own worry was starting to grow. "Let me call the doctor." The next few hours felt like an eternity. Caleb called the pediatrician immediately, his thoughts racing as he held Noah close, feeling the tiny chest rise and fall, the warmth of his body against his. Emily sat beside him, her face filled with concern, but she said nothing. Caleb knew that, deep down, she was terrified. He was terrified too. The doctor arrived quickly, and after a thorough examination, it was determined that Noah was suffering from a severe infection, one that had gone unnoticed for days, maybe longer. The doctor explained that it was treatable, but it would require immediate attention. As Noah was taken to the hospital, Caleb stayed by Emily's side, his heart aching as he held her hand. He could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear she had carried for so long, the fear of losing someone she loved. Caleb had promised to protect them, to keep them safe, and now he was afraid he might fail. The night stretched on as they waited for word from the doctors. Emily had fallen asleep in the waiting room, her head resting on Caleb's shoulder, her small hand still tightly grasping his. Caleb watched the doctors and nurses as they moved in and out of the hospital rooms, the fluorescent lights above casting a cold, sterile glow over everything. Time seemed to slow, and every minute felt like an eternity. He couldn't help but think back to the day he first met Emily, to the moment he had promised to protect her and Noah. This was the test. This was the moment that would prove if he could truly be the father they needed. Hours later, the doctor finally came to them with good news. The infection was serious, but it was treatable, and Noah would be fine. Caleb exhaled in relief, feeling the weight lift off his chest. Emily woke up, her eyes blurry with sleep, and Caleb could see the moment she processed the doctor's words. A small smile spread across her face as she looked up at him. "He's going to be okay?" she whispered. Caleb nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "He's going to be just fine," he said, holding her tightly. In that moment, Caleb realized how much he had grown, how much he had learned about love and sacrifice. It wasn't just about providing for them, about giving them everything they needed. It was about being there for them when they needed him the most. It was about standing by their side, no matter the challenges they faced. The next morning, after Noah was stable, and the doctor had given them the all-clear to go home, Caleb and Emily sat together in the hospital room. Emily was holding Noah, her arms wrapped protectively around him as she gently rocked him. Caleb sat next to them, watching the two of them, his heart swelling with love. He realized that, even though he had been uncertain about his ability to be a father, he had already proven himself. He had made mistakes, and there were still moments of doubt, but he was there. He had been there every step of the way, and that was what mattered. As they left the hospital later that day, Emily looked up at Caleb and smiled, her eyes full of warmth. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice full of gratitude. Caleb smiled back, his heart full. "No need to thank me," he said. "We're family now, and family sticks together." Emily nodded, and for the first time in a long time, Caleb felt like he had truly found his place in the world. He had a family, a real one, and he was going to do everything in his power to protect them. They were his world now, and nothing was ever going to take that away from him. It was a few months after Noah's hospital stay that Caleb realized how much things had truly changed. His life, once filled with meetings, deals, and late nights at the office, was now centered around Emily and Noah. They had become his world, his reason for waking up in the morning. The apartment that had once felt so cold and empty now felt alive, filled with laughter, little footsteps, and the warmth of a family. Emily had grown more comfortable in her new life. She still had moments where she pulled away, but they were fewer now. Caleb had earned her trust, little by little, and with each passing day, the bond between them grew stronger. One Saturday afternoon, Emily and Caleb went for a walk in the park. Noah was napping at home, and they decided to take a break from the usual routine. They walked slowly, the sun shining down on them, a gentle breeze in the air. Emily was quieter than usual, her hands tucked into her jacket pockets, her gaze distant. Caleb noticed, but didn't press her to talk. He knew that sometimes Emily just needed space to think. After a few moments, Emily stopped walking and turned to face him. "Dad," she said, her voice a little unsure. Caleb froze. It was the first time she had called him that. It caught him off guard, but in the best way possible. He felt a lump form in his throat, and for a moment, he couldn't find the right words. But then he smiled. A real, genuine smile. "Yeah?" he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Emily shifted nervously, her eyes searching his face. "I've been thinking," she began, "about my mom, and about you." Caleb's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know what she was going to say, but he knew this was a conversation he had been dreading for a long time. "What about us?" he asked gently. Emily looked down at the ground for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I guess I'm just trying to understand it all," she said quietly. "I didn't know you. I didn't know anything about you, really. But now, I feel like I've got two pieces of my life coming together, and I don't know how to make it fit." Caleb could see the conflict in her eyes, the uncertainty that still lingered. He understood. It wasn't just about him becoming her father. It was about her coming to terms with a past that had been torn apart and learning to accept that things could be different now. "I get it," Caleb said softly, kneeling down so he was at eye level with her. "I know I wasn't there when you needed me, and I can't change that. But I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere. I'll always be here for you." Emily looked at him, her eyes searching for sincerity. She had been through so much, had carried so much pain and loss in her young life. She needed to know, without a shadow of a doubt, that Caleb wasn't just saying the words, he meant them. After a long pause, Emily nodded slowly. "I think I'm ready to try," she said quietly. Caleb felt a wave of relief wash over him. It wasn't the perfect answer, and it wouldn't happen overnight. But it was a start. And in that moment, that's all he needed. The rest would come in time. They stood there for a few more moments. Just the two of them, the quiet of the park, wrapping around them like a blanket. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was a real one. And that was enough. Later that evening, when they returned home, Caleb found himself reflecting on the conversation with Emily. He had spent so much of his life chasing after success, after wealth and power. But now, as he sat in the quiet of their living room, he realized that everything he had been striving for paled in comparison to the family he had. Emily and Noah were the things that mattered most to him now. They were his heart. And he would do whatever it took to make sure they never felt alone again. He was no longer just a businessman. He was a father. And that role meant everything to him. As the days passed, Caleb continued to focus on Emily and Noah, learning how to be the father they needed. He took every opportunity to show them love, to be there for them in ways he had never imagined. And in turn, they gave him something he hadn't known he needed: a sense of purpose, a reason to keep going, and a family to call his own. One evening, as they sat down to dinner together, Emily smiled at Caleb and passed him a small envelope. "I made something for you," she said shyly. Caleb opened the envelope to find a drawing, a family portrait, this time including him, Emily, and Noah, all holding hands with smiles on their faces. "I want to keep us together. Forever," Emily said softly, her voice full of sincerity. Caleb's eyes welled up with tears, but he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The drawing said it all. He had a family now, and nothing in this world would ever make him let go. Months passed, and the world outside continued its relentless pace. But inside Caleb's home, life had taken on a new rhythm, a new meaning. The chaos of the business world, the endless meetings, the constant striving for more, none of that mattered anymore. What mattered now were the quiet moments, the shared laughter, and the simple joys of family life. Emily had blossomed into a young girl full of promise. The weight of her past was still there, but Caleb could see the change in her. She was no longer the withdrawn child who had been forced to grow up too fast. She was starting to smile again, to trust again, to believe in the possibility of a future without fear. Noah, too, had grown stronger. The baby he had been when Caleb first took him in was now a curious little boy, full of energy and wonder. His laughter filled the house. His little feet pattered around, and his wide eyes reflected the world with the kind of innocence that was hard to hold on to, but even harder to take away. Caleb watched them both, Emily and Noah, and he felt a deep, unshakable sense of gratitude. For the first time in his life, he had everything he needed. His business empire had once been his greatest achievement, but now he knew the truth. The real success was in these moments, in this family that he had found. One afternoon, as Caleb sat in the living room reading a book, Emily walked in with a serious look on her face. She sat down beside him, her hands folded in her lap. "Dad," she said, her voice quiet but steady. Caleb looked up from his book, sensing the gravity of her tone. "What's on your mind, Emily?" he asked gently. Emily hesitated, looking down at the floor for a moment before meeting his gaze. "I've been thinking about how things have changed," she began, "and how they've been better. I just want you to know that I don't feel scared anymore. I don't feel like I have to do everything on my own." Caleb's heart swelled with emotion. He had watched Emily struggle with the weight of the past, had seen the hesitation in her eyes when she first came to live with him. To hear her say this now, to see the trust she had in him, it meant everything. "You don't have to do anything on your own," Caleb replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You never did. You're not alone, Emily, and you never will be again." Emily smiled, a soft, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I know," she said, her voice full of warmth. "I know." The conversation was simple, but it was everything Caleb had been hoping for. The years of uncertainty, the nights filled with doubt and regret, had led to this moment, the moment where Emily knew, without a doubt, that she had a father who would always be there for her. The family they had built together was not perfect. They had their struggles, their challenges, but they had each other. And that, Caleb knew, was what truly mattered. That night, after Emily went to bed and Noah had fallen asleep in his crib, Caleb sat on the couch, his mind replaying the journey that had brought him here. He thought about Sarah, about the love they had shared, and the promises they had made. He thought about the pain of losing her, and how, in his grief, he had turned away from everything that truly mattered. But life had a way of bringing you back to what was important. He had found his way back to family, back to Emily and Noah, and for the first time in his life, he understood what love truly was. It wasn't about success or wealth. It was about being there for the ones you love, about putting them first, about showing up every day, even when it was hard. Caleb smiled softly to himself, the weight of the past lifting from his shoulders. He wasn't the man he used to be. He had been broken, but now he was whole again, in a way he had never imagined. And as he sat there, in the quiet of the night, Caleb knew that his life was complete. He had found something far more valuable than any business deal, than any piece of real estate, than any amount of money. He had found family, and nothing would ever take that away from him.